सैयद यूसुफ रजा गिलानी ने स्टाफ कॉलेज कोयटा का दौरा किया। इस मौके पर अपने खिताब में वज़ीर आज़म गिलानी ने हुकूमत के क़याम के वक्त दरपेश मुश्किलात और चैलेंजेस का तफसील के साथ जिक्र किया, जबकि 2 बरस में हुकूमत की जानिब से मुल्की मसाइल के हल के लिए उठाए जाने वाले इक़दामात पर भी रोशनी डाली। आइए वज़ीर आज़म का स्टाफ कॉलेज कोयटा में खिताब सुनते हैं।
To the country, distinguished audience, it would be appropriate to recapitulate the situation at the time when your elected government was formed in March 2008. At that time, a major economic crisis was looming large, while scarcity of essential food items had made the common man's life miserable. The yawning gap between supply and demand of electricity had brought the industrial wheel to standstill. Even the optimists were apprehending hyperinflation and melting down of the economic structure. Capital flight further depressed the economic prospects. Consequently, poverty and unemployment were on the rise. A mix of international financial crunch and skyrocketing oil prices in the global market further compounded the already aggravated economic situation. Terrorists were roaming around unchallenged, while law enforcement agencies looked helpless. Political parties were disarrayed, and the public at large was terrified, while there was no consensus and strategy to deal with such a menacing situation. Judicial crisis brought the whole legal community on the streets. Center-provincial, inter-provincial as well as intra-provincial relations were strained. Institutional wrangling brought the whole government machinery to a halt. International isolation was staring us in the face. Our adversaries were complacently projecting Pakistan as a failed state. Even the confidence of our friends had worn thin. All these issues of vital importance to the country required the government's immediate attention. Now, I will explain to you the steps taken by your democratic government during the last 2 years to overcome these challenges under my watch. Besides addressing the momentous challenges at both external and internal fronts, the transition to the nascent democratic order also required careful and deft handling at the top, for any indiscretion could deal a blow to the system. Dear participants, however, the single most important issue that stared the democratic government in the face and warranted urgent policy response was that of terrorism and extremism. Yet resort to military action was not without its perils. 1. No military action of such proportions was ever undertaken in the history of the country. Secondly, massive displacements of millions of people was feared in case of an open-ended military action whose care was expected to add to the government's economic worth. Thirdly, given the nature of terrain and battle, collateral damage and destruction of infrastructure was feared. Fourthly, and to top it all, there was pronounced lack of definitive national consensus against terrorism. Pakistan's independent media was also vacillating. Distinguished audience, this presents the context in which the democratic government found itself. It was either make or break time. A moment of truth, as they say. There were 2 roads waiting to be trodden with their differentiating lines clearly drawn. The first path was politically expedient, but the cost to the country and our future generations was incalculable. The second road appeared bumpy, full of risks, but a journey on it could also lead to abiding survival of our nation. We were to choose between 2 options, that is between progressive, tolerant and welfare Islamic state as envisioned by Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah or our founding father, or a theocratic, intolerant and extremist state as desired by the extremists. We followed the Qaid-e-Azam's path. We made up our mind to safeguard the identity, values, and ethos of our country and nation. Then came the turn of developing this policy decision into a collective national response. We decided to reach out to the people, who are the real stakeholders in the democratic dispensation. I convened and presided over the All Parties Conference, which was attended by all streaks of political and religious opinion across the divide to craft a consensus on the issue. I also requested the Chief of the Army Staff, General Ishfaq Pervez Kiani, to brief the political leaders about the seriousness on this threat. Pakistan's sovereign parliament, in a joint session to consider the matter, where parliamentarians of all hues and colors were briefed on the threats to the national security and territorial integrity of the country. Parliamentary Committee on National Security formulated a counterterrorism strategy which was subsequently approved by the Parliament. It formed an institutional response to terrorism and went a long way in giving political ownership to a war. As a result of national consensus across the political divide, our military successes in Swat, Malakand, and South Waziristan have been acknowledged globally, thanks to the sacrifices of the people of these areas and demonstration of bravery of our armed forces and security agencies. The instant response of the entire nation and the focused attention of the government in looking after 2.5 million IDPs and their safe return were unprecedented. Now peace has been restored in Malakand and Swat, and the people have started their normal life. Distinguished audience, the major attribute of a democratic system is that it tends to find solution to the complex and intractable problems by evolving consensus and accommodating all stakeholders. Democracy in its very essence is inclusive and participatory. It establishes unity within the broad and diverse viewpoints. There is no doubt about the fact that federations are very delicate political arrangements and can only be kept intact and strengthened by taking everyone on board through an inclusive approach. The democratic government has been very clear in its vision that if federations were to be saved from dangers, it would have to win the strong support of the Fed.